Views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests and not necessarily those of the staff or management of KLAV.
Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Or toll free, 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Please welcome Melanie Reno!
All the guys I've been meeting just have the worst pickup lines. Oh my God. Like, hey, what's your friend's name? Yeah, it's like enough with the lines, just ask me out. You know? So I called my dad from the place. I don't know why. I guess I thought he'd feel sorry and send me the money. But no, he was like, welcome to the real world. I was like, gosh. So I called him back a few days later and I told him, you know, all these extra expenses, I had to take a second job. And he was like, welcome to the real world. So I was like, yeah, as a stripper. Then I was like, welcome to the real world, Dad. About a year ago, this last Tuesday, I was kidnapped. My mom had sent out a mass email to everyone we know, I'm sure a lot of you guys got it, with the subject line in all caps, Melanie was kidnapped, this is not a joke. And she said, look at all the replies you got. And I was like, well, gosh, you know, with a subject line like that, I hope people weren't like, delete. It's weird though, because this is my first full-time job and everything, but I could have sworn I was making more money in college, just working for my parents as their daughter.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. The clip you just heard is from my guest tonight, Melanie Vare, formerly Miss Reno, Melanie Reno. Melanie just got back from her honeymoon. Hi, Melanie. Are you on the phone?
Hello. Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. And you're calling in from Nashville.
From Nashville, yes. Just got back from my romantic honeymoon in Vietnam.
All right. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Also joining us on the show tonight is Lynn Connell. And Lynn, I'm going to let you introduce yourself here to our audience.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Connell, and I'm starting a show on KLAV 12:30 a.m. on Friday at noontime called the Las Vegas Sex and Money Show. I've been on the air for 3 years in the Las Vegas area, and I'm happy to find AM 1230 KLAV as my new home. And thanks so much, Jim, for having me on the air.
And he's going to be co-hosting with us tonight.
I'll be your host.
Absolutely.
Co-host.
The topic of our show is writing for comedy, and we're going to explore the world of comedy and writing for stage and television. But before Melanie and I get into tonight's topic, and Lynn, let's check in with Kevin Parsons. Kevin, are you on the line? No? No? Okay. Well, if Kevin calls in, we'll cut back in. If you're just now tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, right here on KLAV. And on the internet, you can go tune into KLAV1230am.com. My guest is comedian Melanie Vare, and Lynn Connell. I also like to start the show with a few quotes and fun facts. And the first fun fact, I'm going to let Lynn read.
Okay, we're getting ready to come to it. Okay, here's a fun fact. According to collegehumor.com, after over 1 million votes, Monty Python and the Holy Grail has been declared the best comedy of all time.
Okay. Melanie, would you like to take quote number 2?
Okay. Is it the Lucy one?
Yes.
Okay. The longest laugh in television history is from I Love Lucy, Season 6, during an episode called Lucy Does the Tango. Ricky and Desi move out to the country, and their hens fail to lay any eggs. Ricky wants to just get rid of the chickens, so Lucy and Ethel come up with this great idea to buy eggs and place them under the chickens, so Ricky will think the hens laid them. But Fred and Ricky come home before Lucy and Ethel can hatch their scheme, so Ricky, which of course Ricky then asks Lucy to rehearse the tango with him. Lucy tries to talk him out of it, but he won't give in. Lucy has hidden the eggs in her blouse, and of course, while dancing, when Ricky pulls Lucy into his chest, the eggs break and the audience roars. This is what having a live audience is all about. The laughing continued so long, they had to cut part of the laughter out in order to fit it during the airtime.
Yeah, this was actually the longest laugh on recorded television history.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Can I do my fact?
Yes, sir.
The longest-running animated comedy is The Simpsons, which has been on the air for 20 seasons. Seinfeld ran for 9.
That's right. And speaking of I Love Lucy, here is an audio clip from an episode where Lucy is pregnant with their first child and wants Ricky to rehearse reading a children's story. And here's the clip.
Ricky Ricardo. Here, honey, I'll show you what I mean. Now, you take this book and pretend that our child has come to you and said, Daddy, read me a good night story.
All right.
There you are, Daddy.
Once upon a time, in the woods lived a peasant. He was a good man with a noble heart. He spent his time in the forest cutting down bushes from the trees. Cutting wood...
Wait, just a minute. What is this bouges?
Bushes, right in there.
That's boughs.
B-O-U-G-H is bow?
Right.
Bow. He spent his time in the forest cutting down boughs from the trees. Cutting wood all day made his hands strong and raw. One day...
That's rough.
Spelled the same way as the other. O-U-G-H.
That's right. That shows how little you know about the English language.
So I made a little mistake. Made his hands strong and rough. One day he cut wood so fast that by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, his day's work was through. When the...
Hold it, Shakespeare.
Through?
T-H-R-O-U-G-H is pronounced through.
Through, that's what I always say. Now stop picking on me, will you? You're getting me all confused. His day's work was through. It started to rain on the way home, and he got so wet that his nose became red, and he developed a hacking... Who? Well, I know it can't be cow.
It's cough.
Oh, that did it. I had enough. Or should I say, enu? Enough. I don't see why you have to have such a crazy language anyway. In Spanish, you don't have all those ow, o, oo, of, oof sounds. In Spanish, you got a sound, it sounds the same all the time. You write it the same way, it sounds the same way. No matter where you put it, it comes out the same way. Ay, 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 ay. I tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna teach our child to speak Spanish.
Spanish?
That's right. And what's more, I don't want you to talk to the kid until he's 21 years old.
All right, that clip was from I Love Lucy, and that was Ricky Reads a Bedtime Story. The reason we played this clip is we want to talk about the various ways of writing comedy, and that one was just really a serious. If you were to read that, you would not find the humor in it at all. It's the way that Ricky Ricardo or Desi Arnaz did his reading, and Lucille Ball, played her part. I mean, it's literally the characters who made that funny. How do you feel about that, Melanie and Lynn?
Well, I can see where. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Melanie.
No, you first.
Your ranking. You're actually calling from another state, so you go ahead. You're paying a dime here.
Yeah, I think it's all in the delivery, but I think it was, it also has to be written in a certain order to leave some more information to be uncovered. We kind of build. It's like a snowball. So I saw kind of how they, one thing led into the next. But yeah, you read it and it's nothing. It's kind of the same with my storytelling shows. I get a lot of submissions. I'll talk about that later, but I get a lot of submissions, and I can't always tell right off how it's going to end up, how they're actually going to read it on stage. Sometimes I hear it differently than it's performed. Sometimes it's really awesome, and sometimes
Well, Lynn and I were talking earlier about this. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, and and the thing is that it's knowing the actors, knowing their style, and knowing their delivery, and then everybody's such an important part because the actors would not be as effective as they are without good writers. The writers would just have words on a page if it wasn't for the actors interpreting them. So everybody has their role. The writers are the ones that put the facts in. The actors are the ones that make it visceral and emotional. So, and then somebody end up having to raise all the money to get it on the air, too. No.
And I think what's interesting, too, you have to pay attention to the fact that when you're writing a script, a comedy script for a movie as opposed to a television script, I think television would be easier in a way because the writers for a television show know who these actors are from week to week. I mean, obviously in the beginning of a show, they wouldn't necessarily know, but once the show takes off and is, every season.
Maybe here's a question for you, and I remember that in the early days of television, the Ed Wynns, the Milton Berles, the Jackie Gleasons, the people like that had a very, very bombastic style from acting in the 30s and 40s and burlesque halls and whatever else. And then by the 1960s or so, with the exception of Gleason, the humor of the others just didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
As part of the medium and even the writing, that the audience had changed and the demographics of the audience became more sophisticated, some more Midwest, and maybe they get caught up with maybe their writers not being able to make the transition.
Yeah. Melanie, did you have something to say about that?
Wow, you said that very nicely.
Well, one of the things I was going to point out as well is that when you're writing for a movie, you don't have the privilege of knowing who the actor is right away. So how you word that when you're writing a script for a motion picture is entirely different than writing for a television series. In an essence, you follow me on that?
Yeah, because the character is only established for one film unless there are sequels, whereas with television, the characters get to evolve over months and years and seasons.
Yeah.
So, you know what to expect, and it's sort of like, a couple of these shows, everybody wanted to see what Archie Bunker was going to do every week, or everybody wanted to see what George Jefferson, or for that matter, Sheldon and Leonard and Penny and all those people. So they actually more like the characters then to a degree. The script is still important, the plot is still important, but they want to see their friends.
Well, I remember I had Don Barnhart on the show, and he was a director for 40 years in Hollywood. And one of the things he was telling me is that when they would rehearse their scripts throughout the week, there would oftentimes, even though the writers knew who the actors were, even in knowing them, every once in a while, they'd come across a line the actor said, "I don't feel comfortable saying it that way," or whatever. And you have that liberty of changing. I suppose you do in movie scripts as well, but it definitely is a different ball game altogether when you're writing for television as opposed to motion picture scripts. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV 1230 AM on the dial. And on your computer, you can find us on the internet at klav1230am.com. And join us via telephone is Melanie Vare. And before we get into the topic of the show, Writing for Comedy, I'd like for Melanie to tell you a little bit about herself and what she's up to these days. Melanie?
Hello. Yes, and I also wanted to add about the TV show writing is that when you have those characters that are the same every week, it actually kind of almost limits the comedy that you can do because sometimes I'll think of a funny, bit for myself, but I'll be like, oh, I wouldn't say that though, so I can't use that. But it really helps shape.
I think that's a valid point because I think the actors become so much a part of who these characters are, when they're on set, that you really do have, the writers really have a hard job there now, you're right, because they have to make sure they're staying within that character because the actor's going to certainly insist on that.
Or it's kind of interesting when we talk about Lucy, and I did a little research on her, and obviously she had I Love Lucy, she had the Lucy Show, and she had Here's Lucy. And one was because of the divorce from Ricky, obviously, or Desi. My God, you love the characters so much you forget their real names. The second one was because Paramount bought Desilu, so a contractual issue prevented the Lucy Carmichael character from being the same person moving to Here's Lucy. But it was interesting because Lucy took that last show, and it was the only show that she took on social issues, because before that it was about relationships with her family. Second was her and Viv, and then all of a sudden now it was, they used to do social theme like Lucy takes on women's lib, or Lucy takes on computers, or Lucy takes on hot pants or something like that. So it was kind of interesting where you had this character that was very, very well crafted and very, very well known, but they were able to kind of take her for her last 6 or 7 years on the air and say, how would Lucy feel if she were at a bra burning or something like that? I know they didn't do that, or a draft card burning, and then she would just take off vaudeville style with it.
Right. Well, we're going to let Melanie talk a little bit about who she is and what she's doing these days.
Yes. Hello, I'm Melanie, and I created a live monthly female storytelling show that is called That Time of the Month, and it stars me and four other women and one token male, and we each tell a true funny story. It began in Los Angeles. There's a number of other storytelling shows there, but it was only a female storytelling show at the time. And then I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where I live now with my new husband. And I decided to try and start the show here. And we're in our third month now, and it's going great. But this is the first of its kind here, so it's been really interesting. I'm working in LA. The people I booked did shows like that all the time, but here it's kind of the first time. So I'm really working with these ladies and the dude to edit and develop their stories. And sometimes it's a great written piece, but we have to kind of mold it and shape it for the stage. Or sometimes it's a stand-up comedian they have a funny story and they kind of have done a few quick vlogs about it or something, and we kind of, I'll give them some feedback and then they'll rewrite it and shape it into a whole new story for the show. And I'm also a freelance comedy writer.
So even though you've left LA, you're still in the comedy realm.
Yes, you can be in the comedy realm for anywhere. I'm actually... My other job is
radio.
I work for a radio show called the Hollywood Five, and I work out of Nashville, Tennessee, writing about Hollywood entertainment news for a radio station in Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the internet.
That's interesting. And you just got married. Congratulations.
Thank you. Very exciting.
You just got back last week from your honeymoon, I believe.
Yes, romantic Vietnam. Isn't that where everyone goes on their honeymoon?
I've been to Vietnam.
Lynn's been to Vietnam. So.
I'll tell you more about it once I get my cue line in here, okay?
I need my line.
Now, also, Melanie,
to learn so much about world politics.
Well, I've been to Vietnam. It was a place. You can say my line so I could come on.
Well, I wanted to have Melanie. Melanie, you also wrote a book recently, because actually that's how we were introduced. Is that you wrote a book recently on?
Yes. Well, it's hard to say I wrote a book since it's me and about 12 other.
So it's
women.
An anthology.
One guy, yes.
Yeah.
And it's like the best of the live female storytelling show, That Time of the Month, the volume Venice Beach. And it's great. I just got the final manuscript back. I don't know, are these called manuscripts also? It's great. And it should be out soon.
All right. And Lynn wanted to talk about the...
Oh, the book. Okay. Anyway, I'll segue in on Vietnam to start with, because I've been to Vietnam. I spent 2 weeks there. I was in Ho Chi Minh City at the Sofitel, at the Rue Van Duan, and then I went to Da Nang, and I also went to Hanoi, and I went to the Kuching tunnels and all those different places. Now, I had some funny things that happened in Vietnam, because the U.S. Embassy, where the helicopter took off in 1975 that signaled the end of the Vietnam War, everybody remembers it on the films of those days. Now, they knocked that down, but the Imperial Palace, where other helicopters took off, is still there. So I toured that area, and what they did is that at the top where the helicopters took off, they actually have a karaoke studio up there. So they have all these red, Vietnamese communist troops, all stern-looking guys, and we're having this cultural thing. So what happened was that they're playing like a traditional Vietnamese harp, and they're going ding, 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 and they go, hey, yo, American, you'll sing something too, And so I said, do you have Elvis? And they throw Elvis on, so I'm at the top on that place where the helicopter left going, they're caught in a trap, I can't walk out because I love you too much, baby, and these guys are just like on the floor, so I ended up teaching them how to say, like, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and the captain of the plane goes, okay, whatever happened in Vegas, stay in Vegas, like that, and then I said, the strip wasn't built on winners, and they go, strip was not built on winner, like that, and they just had to rehearse this, and then I was saving souls down in the city park because, I'm 5'10", but I weigh around 240 pounds, and everybody was a lot smaller than I was. So they all started calling me Buddha, and they're rubbing my belly for good luck. Oh, and so I was like marrying people and blessing them and saying, going, now is blind, now you can see, rub my belly, and you'll have 15 kids, They go, so I rub belly high, like that, And I'm like, okay, you got a problem with your back? Watch this, I already did heal, rub my belly, like that. But I was having a ball with these guys, and it was just a great time, and there's a lot of wonderful things to see, but it's an interesting way. What possessed you to have your honeymoon in Vegas? I'm sorry, in South Vietnam? What did you find did you like the weather? No. Okay.
Yeah, it was 100 degrees and about 100% humidity, so that was why we went there. I really like the humidity and heat. No, my husband actually has traveled to so many places already that there were barely any left for us. So, no. So we started looking at different areas, and I really wanted to go to Thailand or Japan or something in the Southeast Asia area, and he'd already been to both of those, so we started looking around, and one of us said Vietnam, and the other was like, yeah, that would be so interesting, and so we just kind of went with it, and we were so busy getting married and moving to Nashville that we... the Kuching tunnels are romantic, they have all those tunnels under Ho Chi Minh City that stretch 20 miles in either direction, and you probably saw them, right? You toured the Kuchings? I didn't just see them. You didn't? I crawled around the side of them. You guys could have gone. You guys could have gone to the 10 Feet Below Club or something like that. Because they have tunnels over all of metropolitan Ho Chi Minh City, and it's just like Hogan's Heroes. It's the same exact thing where they had the guys in the tunnels running around. So you guys didn't have any tunnel love or nothing like that, Well, we were on a tour with about 30 other people, but no Mekong makeouts or nothing, Well, my husband did get a picture of my butt right in his face because you're crawling through these tiny tunnels, and so I guess my butt was in there. So it's this big shot of my butt. So we do have that memory for.
Well, we're gonna move on here to now that we visited Vietnam. We're gonna move on to a clip that we have from Carol Burnett's show, and it's with Vicki Lawrence portraying Mama, and Carol Burnett's portraying Eunice, her daughter, and they get into an argument over a board game. And we're gonna bring this up because I want to show how even when you write something, how when someone starts ad-libbing, it can actually even be funnier. And what happens is Vicki Lawrence, who usually sticks to the script, goes off script, and Carol Burnett cannot contain herself. So here's a clip from the Carol Burnett show.
Are you sure? It was a 7! You are really nuts, nuts. One of these days they're gonna come over here and lock you up. Oh, lay off of me. You ain't playing with a full deck, Eunice. I think somebody blew your pilot light out. That's a new one, Mama. You wait, there's more, Eunice. in the windmills of your mind. You're playing hockey with a warped puck. Will you cut it out?
You're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, and I'm joined by Melanie Vare, and Lynn Connell is in the studio with me. And if you would like to call into the show, you can call in locally at 702-731-1230. If you're calling in from out of state, the number to call is 1-866-820-5528. Our topic of the show this evening is writing for comedy, and my guest is Melanie Vare. Melanie, what advice would you give someone trying to break into comedy?
Well, I would definitely suggest that they kind of think about what area of comedy you want to get into, because there are so many different areas that you don't think of, and sometimes you can't predict, from the beginning what you're going to do. So I really do think actually stand-up comedy is a great way to learn how to be a comedy writer as well. I really, that's what I draw on for the comedy that I write. I've taken a few writing workshops and a performance workshop in LA that I love called the UNCAD Lab. But besides that, really, I just got on stage thousands of times, and it really helped me to understand what people think is funny, what people truly think is funny, because a lot of times you're with your friends and you got your little jokes with the friends, but that really doesn't translate to anyone outside of those groups. So getting on stage a lot, and then after that, I think honing your comedy, being able to bounce it off of a writing partner or work it out at a workshop. What I do now is I write my stories and then I take it to some sort of writing group. I've done a bunch of them, and I get some good ideas, I get food for thought things I wouldn't have thought of with the story, different angles to go with. So I really think experience of just doing it over and over and taping yourself is a key technique that stand-ups use. So you can go, but the key is you have to go back and listen to it, which is the worst part, because I hate hearing the sound of my voice, but that really helps to then see where you're repeating the uhs and the ums. And I actually also did Toastmasters for a while, and I think they would tell me I've probably had at least 10 uhs and ums right now, so I'm going to stop.
Well, Lynn, did you have something to add to that?
Oh, actually, I like the way that you brought that up, because when people do comedy, and before I was in the business world for 25 years, I did theater and I did original humor and stand-up and whatever else. And there has to be that translation between Bob, who's funny with his family, and Uncle Bill that's always funny when the family meetings, then to take it out to perfect strangers. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up, because they don't know, like what you were saying, Jim, is that they don't know that person for years and years and years. Then all of a sudden they're in that basement of the comedy club in LA or New York, and no one knows them, and you have to establish yourself as a comedian. So very apropos.
Well, let's listen to another excerpt from one of my favorite shows, which is The Big Bang Theory. And in this episode, Sheldon he doesn't understand why Penny bought him a Christmas gift. And so when Penny gives him the gift, he knows he feels obligated now that he has to buy her one. So here's a clip from The Big Bang Theory.
Hey, Sheldon, are you and Leonard putting up a Christmas tree?
No, because we don't celebrate the ancient pagan festival of Saturnalia.
Saturnalia?
Gather round, kids. It's time for Sheldon's beloved Christmas special.
In the pre-Christian era, as the winter solstice approached and the plants died, pagans brought evergreen boughs into their homes as an act of sympathetic magic intended to guard the life essences of the plants until spring. This custom was later appropriated by Northern Europeans, and eventually it becomes the so-called Christmas tree.
And that, Charlie Brown, is what boredom is all about.
Okay, well, thank you for that, but I got you and Leonard a few silly neighbor gifts, so I'll just put them under my tree.
Wait. You bought me a present?
Uh-huh.
Well, why would you do such a thing?
I don't know, because it's Christmas?
Oh, Penny. I know you think you're being generous, but the foundation of gift giving is reciprocity. Like, you haven't given me a gift. You've given me an obligation.
Don't feel bad, Penny. It's a classic rookie mistake. My first Hanukkah with Sheldon, he yelled at me for 8 nights.
Honey, it's okay. You don't have to get me anything in return.
Of course I do. The essence of the custom is that I now have to go out and purchase for you a gift of commensurate value and representing the same perceived level of friendship as that represented by the gift you've given me. Well, it's no wonder suicide rates skyrocket this time of year.
Okay, you know what? Forget it. I'm not giving you a present.
No, it's too late. I see it. That elf sticker says to Sheldon. The die has been cast. The moving finger has writ. Hannibal has crossed the Alps.
I know it's funny when it's not happening to us.
Sheldon, I am very, very sorry.
No, I brought this on myself by being such an endearing and important part of your life. I'm going to need a ride to the mall.
It's happening to us.
That's interesting how just a straight character can just make that so humorous,
Sort of a reaction, where they had Howard just sitting there, kind of keying the audience in. And I hear that happens a lot in TV. They always have characters that kind of react for the audience a little bit and kind of focus it in, even though it's done a little bit tongue-in-cheek in this situation here. Do you think that, the Sheldon, the gentleman that plays Sheldon, do you think he's going to get typecast? Because he's so powerful, you know what I'm saying, what he does.
Well, what do you think, Melanie?
Yeah, it's always interesting after a show goes off there how long it takes before people forget. Like, I still don't know if I could imagine Joey from Friends. I know he's done some other stuff, but
he actually tried to do his own series, didn't he, for a while, and it died in like the first 6 months or something. Joey did, and it's like Henry Winkler, who was the Fonz back in the 70s. He stole the show. And they actually, the producers said, well, we don't want you, Ronnie Howard. We want, Fonzie's Happy Days. We're going to get rid of you, and you're going to be the star. And he says, wait a minute, I can't carry a show with my little shtick. And there's a difference between being that walk-on bit part character person and the type of actor that can keep it all together. They all have their own parts.
Yeah, who wants all that pressure to carry a show?
Well, but I think when you're doing a show, I'm sure they're very happy, especially with the money they're making.
Yeah.
But like William Shatner went on, he went on from a series of Star Trek, and you always are going to remember him, but he's done so many shows since then. So I think it's possible. I think it's very possible.
Yeah.
It just takes so much to do, and it's one of those things where with William Shatner, I think that in the 80s, he was always a very tongue-in-cheek T.J. Hooker, and he kind of, I think he got away with it because he was a Shatner over-the-top type of an actor and did that. But a lot of these people, they just never recover. They have that one act, and they're identified with it.
And now, who was the father in Married with Children?
Oh, Ed O'Neill.
And then he went on. Now he's in Modern Family.
Modern Family.
So I think it's possible to definitely break that character.
And it was funny that he played in cop shows in the 70s and 80s, and he was always in those gritty cop and robber series. And then all of a sudden, he comes out of nowhere to be this over-the-top comedian actor.
Right. Melanie, we have another fun fact if you'd like to read it. It has to do with Comedy Central.
Yes. Okay, so these are the 10 greatest stand-up comics of all time as rated by Comedy Central. All right, you ready?
Yes,
Number 10. Number 10 is Eddie Murphy. Number 9, Roseanne Barr. Number 8, Bill Cosby. Number 7, Rodney Dangerfield. I saw him live once. Pretty awesome. Number 6, Steve Martin. Number 5, Chris Rock. 4, Woody Allen, one of my favorites. 3, Lenny Bruce. 2, George Carlin, and 1, Richard Pryor.
So how do you feel about that list?
Well, where's Carrot Top? Because I actually did see him live in your city, Las Vegas, and I honestly, I got free tickets, but he was amazing. He's really good at what he does, but I'm kind of kidding about that. my problem with this list is there's only one woman, Roseanne Barr. I don't know if she would be my only woman to make a top 10 list. She's funny.
Was there anyone that you didn't see on the list that you should, other than what you just mentioned, be on the list? Like, I'm thinking Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah. He's nowhere on the list. He was a stand-up comic.
I know. Wow, that I didn't even notice that, but that's crazy. And there's just so many comedians who are on the road and stuff that people just don't really know of that much. This guy Brian Regan is hysterical. But there's also, what about Joan Rivers?
Joan Rivers, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Her, that documentary that she did last 2 years ago was hilarious. I mean, she is a hard-working comedian. And Ellen DeGeneres, I just think she is so original, and there's so many women, but it's what I realized, though, is a lot of the women I like, they kind of fall into the category of not necessarily stand-up. So they're comedians. The comedians are comedians, even if they're not doing stand-up. There's Betty White, which, she does stand-up on the roast. And did she start as stand-up? I'm not really sure. She's just a comedic actress.
I think she started on radio.
She did a little bit of everything. She actually did dramatic roles for a while. She did a ton of game shows because the old host of Password, the legendary Alan Ludden, who was one of the big quiz show hosts in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, he died in the mid-70s. I guess that she was a guest on his show and literally asked her out for her first date on the show. They were both smitten with one another. So there they are on Password, and he looks at Betty White and he goes, "What are we doing tonight?" And she's like, "Anything you want, baby," like that. And then they were married for like 25 years, but I think she had a lot to do with it.
He actually courted her for a whole year, and he actually gave her an engagement ring. And when she didn't accept it, he wore it around his neck on a chain for a year.
Oh, okay.
And he just kept asking her over and over, and
Over
finally
and over again.
she gave in.
Yeah.
One of the things we're going to talk about also is where did comedy come from? And we have a list here from enotes.com, and I'm going to read the first part, and I'm going to let Lynn help me here. And Melanie, I'm not sure if you have that or not, but many look to ancient Greece for a starting point in defining comedy because it produced some of the earliest existing critical texts that tackled the subject. Yet in Greece, as in subsequent eras, comic expressions were deemed far less important than serious ones. As a result, earlier writings about the nature of comedy were fewer and far less detailed than those exploring tragedy. And Lynn, would you like to take essential facts?
Sure. We'll go down and we'll start off into the Middle Ages when the church strove to keep the joyous and critical aspects of drama to a minimum. And it's kind of interesting that even today, everybody has their favorite funny priest. I know I grew up Catholic, and there was always one guy that was a comedian that would get everybody going. And then in the Renaissance, it became introduced and blended with classic comedy and Elizabethan comedy with Shakespeare and Ben Jonson, and it was a way of parodying political figures and events back in those days. And Shakespeare also, with his comedies ranging from the farcical to the tragicomic, interesting, okay? He was the master of the comedy, whereas Jonson was influenced by satire. And then all of a sudden, oh my Lord, vive la France, Molière, who was a great French, person that wrote all kinds of comedies. In fact, I lived in France for 2 years, went to university over there, and he did a lot of satirical comedy. He did one called Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, which, interestingly enough, was just like Lucy and Ricky mispronouncing words. So you never know. That might have actually come from Molière, the Lucy and Ricky thing, because the Bourgeois Gentilhomme of Molière was where a very wealthy businessman who was born very common but became very wealthy, he wanted to marry a duchess to increase his social standing, so he was going to pay her a ton of money, and he had to know how to read poetry to her. So then it went to Wynchley, Congreve, all these other wonderful British authors. And then in the 18th century, it still kept satirical, but guys like Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw, who wrote My Fair Lady and Major Barbara, and Anton Chekhov, who wrote The Good Doctor, which many years ago I was the lead in high school, who Neil Simon got a lot of his comedy from. I'm taking license, aren't I? Well, let's do the 20th century.
Well, no, but it's important to talk about where comedy comes from. So, and how it's changed over the years.
How it's changed because a lot of the modern comedy took themes from these older comedies and might have made the 1950s version of a Shakespeare or whatever else. I mean, even the Brady Bunch used to parody some Shakespeare and some things like that, which was kind of interesting. I'm going way off on a tangent, but it's true.
Now I'd like to play a hilarious clip with the best example of dry humor I can think of. This is an audio clip from the Golden Girls, and the three women of the house have decided it's too difficult to live together. So Betty White's character, Rose, decides to tell a story that justifies or a reasoning for why they should split up. You can hear B. Author and Rue McCallaghan trying to keep from busting out laughing in the background. On the video clip, you can see it is all the two of them can do to finish the scene. What's great about the scene is Betty White. She never once breaks her momentum or stops to acknowledge the reaction. She just continues like a pro with her lines. Here is the Great Herring War from the Golden Girls.
All right, I have had it. Thanks to all this constant bickering, I have a splitting headache.
Oh, girls, let's face facts. The three of us just can't agree on anything. I mean, it is obvious we were not meant to live together.
I hate to agree with you, but I think you're right. I think so, too.
In fact, I know so. This is exactly what happened during the Great Herring War.
The Great Herring War?
Yes, between the Lindstroms and the Johanssons.
Oh, that Great Herring War.
The two families control the most fertile herring waters off the coast of Norway, so naturally it seemed like it would be in their best interest to band together. Oh, boy, was that a mistake. You see, they couldn't agree on what to do with the herring.
Oh, well, that's understandable. I mean, the possibilities are overwhelming.
Exactly. The Johanssons wanted to pickle the herring, and the Lindstroms wanted to train him for the circus.
Weren't they kind of hard to see riding on the elephants?
Oh, not that kind of circus. A herring circus. Sort of like SeaWorld, only smaller. Much, much smaller. But bigger than a flea circus.
Tell me, Rose, did they ever shoot a herring out of a cannon?
Only once. But they shot him into a tree. After that, no other herring would do it.
Oh. You're making this up.
I am not. My grandfather told me that story. Of course, he also used to call me by my sister's name. And sometimes he'd wear his underwear on the outside of his pants. I guess he wasn't a very reliable source.
Oh, girls. Girls, do you realize what just happened?
Well, I know I've been having a very good time, and there wasn't even a man in the room.
I'll tell you what, if you can watch this on YouTube and not laugh, there's something wrong. It is hysterical. Have you seen it, Melanie? Have you seen that clip?
Probably so. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Their timing is just incredible.
What was hilarious about it is how Betty White sat there and was so serious. She never, ever broke her stride during all this. But Rue McClanahan, I can never say her name, Rue McClanahan and B. Author, they could not keep a straight face. I mean, it was all they could do to say their lines. So, did you see that, Lynn?
Yeah. In fact, I had a very good friend of mine, and she was a major fan of the Golden Girls. She absolutely loved them. And her and her significant other got married, and the poor baby got pregnant, and she went to becoming like 350 pounds and had her little daughter and whatever else. And what I gave her for her gift to take care of her little baby girl was the entire full season, all seasons, DVDs of the Golden Girls, so she could watch them sitting at home. So it was kind of an interesting thing. But no, we would talk about them every so often, and they're great comedy for the audience they're intended for, which are ladies of a certain age and younger women and whatever else. Probably not the kind of thing that a bunch of 18-year-old guys drinking beer would watch, but they're very, very well written, and they really reflect that sensitivity of women in their elder years and their golden years, coping with all things they had to do, and then making it entertaining too.
Well, we were talking earlier as well about comedians and how they evolve. And if you think about it, Betty White was on Mary Tyler Moore's show.
Yeah.
And that was one distinct character. Then when she went to the Golden Girls, it was a complete turnaround from the type character she played on Mary Tyler Moore. And now she's on, I think it's, what is that?
Well, now she's on that...
Hot in Cleveland.
Oh, Hot in Cleveland, yes.
Hot in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then she's also doing that little reality show running around L.A. like everybody else does, watching people do wacky things, and
that's
on
right.
Friday.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Something that I started watching was, now in our digital television, they have MeTV, Antenna TV, all these... stations that play the old, lesser-known 1960s and 50s series. And it's interesting that you'll get a character that's very, very typecast and see them on some show like Route 66 or The Naked City or something like that in a role completely outside of their character. And it's amazing, like Darren on Bewitched, Dick York, playing a very serious, intense brain surgeon doing brain surgery, and everybody watching him, and you're looking at this guy. That's the guy that does Sam like that, and it's like he cannot be like doing brain surgery in a major hospital, or B. Arthur, Edith, going Archie, being this real tough, rough tavern owner. Down down on the Bowery, saying, you say one more thing and I'll come across that table and I'll punch you in the mouth, that kind of stuff. But it's amazing to see those actors before their characters were cast, seeing them in totally different roles.
Yeah. Melanie, did you have anything to add to this?
I just think it's really interesting that I was probably, 10 years old watching
I know, you're very young.
The Golden Girls talking about menopause and stuff, and I loved it. It was my favorite show was the Golden Girls, me and my sister, and it's just interesting that it must have been funny. Because what did we know about all that stuff? But their characters were just so defined.
How do you two feel about the way comedy has changed over the years? Have you seen it progress in a different direction, or because you remember Archie Bunker?
I think a lot of people would say that the use of sex and profanity has gotten a lot more into the forefront than, say, Bill Cosby or different people that never emitted a cuss word on the air in his entire life. And I think to a degree, comedy's gotten a lot more working class, a lot more pedestrian, a lot more crude than it used to be, say, in the 70s. But then again, in the 70s, people were grasping those very difficult social issues like the war and Watergate and different things like that, and it probably reflects the change in the audience. But I would say the things that I hear, and I like the comedians today, is that maybe there is that lack of sophistication. It might have gotten a little bit more rude and crude than it had to be.
But I'm not so sure that's true, though, because Joan Rivers.
I know. I was going to beg to differ. I mean, I know what you're saying, but there's always those elements to movies, like with Bridesmaids. There's the girls crapping in the street, but I hope you can say that on radio. But what was genius about Bridesmaids is really those conversations that Maya and Kristen had together. Just one-on-one, those offbeat conversations that were just so genius, and them driving by the police guy 100 times doing different funny things, and so I think what's happened with comedy is it's definitely less like set up, punch. It's very, and like with storytelling is really huge in LA and New York, and who wants to go listen to someone just tell a long story? Like in back in the day, that wouldn't have flown because it's there's not enough punchlines and.
But
the attention span has changed. from how it used to be maybe 20 years ago. And you're absolutely right that, there are gems out there. There are still good writers and good actors and whatever else. I guess, they're still there. The one thing that's kind of interesting that when you look at TV, all the reality shows and all this exhibitionism that's replacing actors and comedians taking on these issues. It's like anybody can act like an idiot for a couple of dollars, whereas maybe they weren't able to do that years ago.
Well, what's interesting too with comedy writing is actually getting easier for someone to submit a spec to the studios as opposed to 10, 15 years ago, because there's so many reality shows on now. They're looking for the next best and great comedy show out there. So for a comedy writer, this is really a great time.
It's a flat market,
Yeah, and I think they're really looking for unique things. Like, I don't know if you guys watched Portlandia, but people kept telling me about it. I finally checked it out. I mean, that is a hilarious show that's just like nothing I've ever seen. A little bit of sketch, and it's really interesting. So that's definitely. It seems like there's room for unique concepts, but they have to first get big on the internet or on another source first, and then they'll get on a TV show. They'll get their own TV show.
Yeah. It's sort of a flat market now, because when you think of it, 20 years ago you had 5 channels, and now you've got 200. And the audiences are all segmented. And I've heard also that failed television shows are making a new life with new episodes on Netflix and Amazon and everything else.
Almost all your cable shows, they're having reruns of the old comedies. Used to be you had to have like 100 episodes to go into syndication. But I believe now it doesn't matter that much, Yeah,
the venue, they're actually producing new episodes. I hear of Pan Am and a lot of the shows that were canceled, just to get them on Netflix and get them to a different audience. And interestingly enough, it's all about money. I mean, everybody's got a great script, everybody's got a great story, and everybody's got great humor. But unless you've got those gazillions of dollars to get out there, chances are it's not going to happen. So maybe these are going to make financially lucrative venues to make all these things happen.
Well, we're running down to the last few minutes of the show, so I'm going to go ahead and read them. For our listeners who are not aware of it, we're moving to a new day and time. On Tuesday, June 19th, the topic of our show is going to be writing for television and movies. And if you have an interest in writing for television or for the motion picture industry, this is the show for you. My guest will be former guest Judy McFadden and Don Lewis Barnhart. They're going to return for an encore performance, and it was a performance. I would like to thank my guest, author and comedian Melanie Vare, and I also like to thank Lynn Connell for co-hosting tonight. You can find links and information about my guests on the Aspects of Writing website at www.aspectsofwriting.com. That's www.apectsofwriting.com. Remember, beginning June 19th, Aspects of Writing will broadcast live every other Tuesday at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on KLAV, and on the internet at www.klav1230am.com. However, we will maintain our original time slot on VegasAllNetRadio.com and rebroadcast every Wednesday at 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you can go to the internet, go to Vegas All Net Radio Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock p.m. To understand more about these changes and future air dates and lineups, you can go to your computer and log on to aspectsofwriting.com, and everything is on our website. Please sign our guestbook while visiting the Aspects of Writing website. You can post questions or comments on our guestbook page as well, or email us directly, aspectsofwriting@yahoo.com. Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV. This is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it.
Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV, every other Monday at 9 p.m. Your host, James Kelly, will bring you an informative look at every aspect of the writing industry. Guests on the show will share their experience and what inspired them to write. Together, we will explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and sell your work. So join us every other Monday for Aspects of Writing right here on KLAV.